don't eat medicine. Anyway, we live in Indonesia, which, as you can tell on this map, is right between Australia and then mainland Asia. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world, population-wise. The largest country in the world, population-wise, is China. Communist or Buddhist, whatever you want to say. Then you have India, which is Hindu. Then you have the United States of America. And just a couple million behind the United States of America, population-wise, is Indonesia. But if you take all of the population of the United States and you put it on that island, the red island where it says Jakarta, which is about the size of Tennessee. Well, I'm sorry, if you take half the population of the United States and put it on that red island, which is the size of Tennessee, then you would have the island we live on, Java, which is one of the most populated spots in the world, which is very difficult for my introverted husband, because you cannot be alone. There's no word in Indonesian for privacy. There is a word for alone, but it's a negative word. So when he wants to be alone, the kids and I leave the house, and he gets to stay in his room. It's lovely. This is our city, Jakarta. This is an ugly picture of our city, but it's a bit more realistic. It is, recently, we were called the second largest metroplex in the world. But metroplex, there's some open space, so I don't really consider that. We're always in the top 10 with around 26 million people. And this is what I mean by population density. Can you pick out Anthony? I'm the one that drives the car because I usually am toting 3 kids around, and he rides his motorbike. And he gets very gripey whenever he has to ride in the car with us because he always says, how's on my motorbike? I'll be at the front of this line, because obviously if you're in the car, you're at the very back at the stoplight. But the next slide shows the beautiful city of Jakarta. Jakarta is like Washington, D.C. and New York rolled in together. It's the financial and political capital of Indonesia. We recently went through an election, and in our 40-year history, 60, we became a country right after World War II ended. We were a Dutch colony. This is only the first time in history that we have peacefully elected a second president. So we've elected presidents before, but there's always been a coup to get the next president. And it's only like our 6th president in 60 years. So we're very excited. This new guy, actually I just saw last week, he has decided to lift a lot of the persecution of Christians. He's going to encourage church buildings to be built. Indonesia is a large Muslim country, but we are not a fanatical Muslim country. Most Indonesians that I meet are happy to are fine with me sharing with them. And at the end of when I talk to them, they'll say, that's very interesting, but what we believe is different. They don't get angry with me. They're not frustrated with me, but what they believe is simply different. The government is a democracy, so even though we are a Muslim country, we're a democracy, which is great, but they just don't issue building permits for churches. There's a mosque on every corner, but it's very hard to get a church built. Our new president, supposedly his mother was a Christian, so he is a bit more favorable towards Christians. So that is a huge answer to the prayer. Christians across Indonesia were praying that he would be elected. It was it was last August. It was a very tense election because the guy that was running against him had actually been in charge of a lot of Christians being killed in some of the islands. Typically, Christians are not killed in Indonesia, just in a few islands, and that's really more ethnic disputes than religious disputes. You have traditional Christians fighting against traditional Muslims. So it's really sad because those Christians are dying for their faith, but a lot of them don't even know Jesus. They were just born in Christian homes. But overall, we're a very peaceful Muslim country. Anthony is the administrative assistant or secretary for Java. Indonesia is divided with the INB in 3 clusters, and he does fun stuff like budgets, taxes, just exciting things like that for Java. And I'm a homeschooling mom, so sometimes the kids have a good teacher, and sometimes they have a very impatient teacher, depending on the day. Next slide, please. Up until 20 years ago, this is hard to word, so it might be easier to read. Muslim people groups with over 1,000 believers. There were only 2 Muslim people groups with up to 1,000 believers until 20 years ago. But now there's about 50. Within the last 20 years, there's now 50 Muslim people groups with over 1,000 believers, and 8 of those are in Indonesia. Indonesia is a large archipelago. We have all kinds of people groups. In fact, one of the clusters has more unreached people groups in it than any other area of the world. So we are a very lost place. I wanted to tell you about Indonesia because that's where we live. But that's not really our passion. I mean, it is our passion because we live there. But you were singing about Grace. I thoroughly enjoyed the song. It was beautiful. And it's neat in our lives. We were in Indonesia for 4.5 years on the island of Sumatra, where Anthony tried to farm. As they say, you can turn a farmer into a preacher, but it's really hard to turn a preacher into a farmer. And so it was a very difficult 4 years. And after 4.5 years there, we went to Afghanistan and had it even more difficult 2.5 years. And so we decided to go back home to Indonesia after we saw that. And when we left Afghanistan, we were a lot of bad things had happened. And we were pretty ugly on the inside. And we were pretty angry. And we were pretty bitter. And we went back to Indonesia. And my prayer really was, God, your fire refines us. But it can also scar and lump and make us ugly. And please let this difficult situation mold us to be more like you, purify you to be more like you, not just scar us and make us ugly. And within 2 weeks of us being back in Indonesia, a person we didn't know came up to us and said, hey, I hear you speak Farsi. There's Afghan refugees in prison. Could you come translate for them? They want to hear about Jesus. And Anthony said, nope. I've shaken the dust off my feet of Afghanistan. Forget it. But God's Spirit just worked. And so we got involved in that, and that was 6 years ago. And it's one of those really neat things about seeing how God can take your trash and your ugliness and the stuff that you thought was nasty, and He can turn it into something beautiful. And it is purely through His grace. It is not of ourselves. So we want to share with you more about what God is doing among Afghan and Iranians in Indonesia.
So over the last 6 years, we've worked with an American business partner who is very interested in ministry. And we've developed the ministry to about 100 refugees. We're supporting about 58 families right now. These refugees who have left either for political or religious reasons. Some have also left for economic, but that's a slightly different case. Can you go to the next slide, please? The good news of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus is being proclaimed in Iran and Afghanistan. You don't hear that very much. What you normally hear are the bad things that are happening in those countries. But actually, there are many people dying for their faith, there are many people in jail, but the gospel is still going out in that place, and the church is growing, both inside and outside of Afghanistan and Iran. The Iranian church is probably the fastest growing people group, Christian people group in the world. There are well over 100,000 believers. Just in the last few years, there were 100,000 before that, but now there are well over 200,000 believers altogether. They come to Indonesia because of religious, political, economic persecution. Next slide, please. They go from Iran, usually down to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. They fly, or they pay someone to take them by boat. Once they get there, then they fly to Malaysia, and they try to register with the UNHCR, and then the UN, United Nations, and then they fly down to Indonesia or take a boat and illegally come into Indonesia. Most of the Afghans are there illegally, most of the Iranians are there on a visa of some sort. But then they try to take a boat down to Australia because the UN process is a long process. It takes about 2 years to register as a refugee. And so during that time, they can't work, and their money runs out. So a lot of them will just pay thousands of dollars to get on a boat. And this is what happens to a lot of those boats. They get caught up in the water, and get caught up on the rocks, or their boat breaks apart in the ocean. There was a boat that sank last time we were here, actually, back home, December 3 Christmases ago. A boat which was arranged out of our church. We didn't even know that, but some of our people going to our church arranged a boat with 250 people on board. The boat sank about 60 miles off the coast of Java. Only maybe 40 people survived. It was a really devastating thing for all the refugees, because it changed even Australia's policies. Australia then started cutting down on the amount of refugees they let in. They changed their prime minister over these boats. We got a few of those guys back. Some of them stayed in the water for 3 days. Most of the women and children all died, but a few of the men survived, and they ended up back in our church. Just devastating to see these guys doing these boats. So part of our ministry has been to keep from getting on the illegal boats. And we've saved quite a few. There's been quite a few that they were getting ready to get on a boat, they didn't get on, and that boat sank. Next slide, please. Through that, we've been able to do a lot of evangelism and discipleship. And we have around 12 to 14 house churches going at any one time around the city. There are other house churches actually in other parts of Indonesia on other islands. But in our sphere of influence in Jakarta, we have about 12 groups. We typically have around 100 people we're discipling. They come together on Sunday morning for a worship service. And these are actually not real pictures of our service because we can't show that. It would be dangerous for us to show the people that are in our services. But they are coming to Christ very quickly. They're very open to hearing the gospel. They come to us sometimes being anti-Islamic, saying we've gotten rid of Islam. We don't know what we want to become, but we know we don't want to be Islam. What do you have to offer us? And we share the gospel, and if they come to Christ, then we disciple them. And we spend a lot of time in discipleship with them. Next slide, please. This is going to be the story about one of the guys who lived with us, Amin.
Amin is the guy in the green shirt in that last picture. He left Iran. Most Iranians, shockingly are not that fundamental Islamic. It's their government that's fundamental Islamic. The opposite is true in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, it's grassroots. Refugees outside of Afghanistan who become Christians have been killed by their fellow Afghans because they have renounced the faith. When the Afghans come to Indonesia, if they become believers, they don't want their picture put on Facebook. They get nervous when we're with the Iranians, and the Iranians are taking pictures of everything because they don't want to be known because their families might kill them. Still, the Iranians get out of Iran and they're like, freedom, freedom, and they are just excited about the freedom. Sometimes they misinterpret what that means, but anyway, Amin left Iran to go to Malaysia as a student, and there he came in contact with a guy who witnessed to him, and he chose to follow Jesus. Well, then he was in Thailand and became part of a Bible study there of about 6 or 8 guys. And a couple of his friends from his Bible study went home to Iran, and they were picked up at the airport and promptly put in jail. And so he realized at that time he couldn't go to jail, he couldn't go home because someone had infiltrated the Bible study and given their names to the government. So he then got himself registered as an asylum seeker for Australia. And he came to Indonesia, and we didn't know him that well, but he immediately jumped into our ministry, real good guy, and he was living with a bunch of different guys, and one day he said, can I just stay at your house for a week or two? I just need a break from my apartment of, 6 people? 12 people? I mean, they were fighting at 2 o'clock in the morning about pillows and stuff. He's like, I'm just exhausted. We said, sure, you can come live with us for a week or two. And after a week or two, we reevaluated, and we thought, he's a good guy. I normally would not invite random men to live in our house, but he lived with us for 1.5 years, and he became part of our family. He was dating a Filipino girl in Thailand. Can you say international? And they continued to date, and they got engaged at our house when she visited a few months ago. He has now moved on to Australia, and we miss him very much. But in Australia, he has already gotten involved in the church, and he's doing ministry. And that's really our hope. Our vision for these people that we disciple is that, because we only have them for about 2 to 2.5 years at the most, is that what you learn here, you will take with you to Australia. It doesn't stop here. Don't just be part of what we're doing. Be part of what God is doing. Because I'm telling you guys, if you see an Iranian in America, don't be afraid. Please share with them, because they are coming to Christ like crazy. I mean, His Spirit is just falling upon them. And it is such an exciting thing to be a part of what God is doing among them.
So how can you be involved in what God's doing around the world, either with Iranians or other unchristian people groups? You can pray, give, go, and serve. Please pray for our family, pray for our other missionaries, pray for our refugee ministry, pray for the persecuted church. And we often forget about the persecuted church. They're often quiet. A lot of the work that's going on in the Muslim world is very quiet. We don't share it. When a pastor gets put in jail or when he gets killed, we don't share that around the world because it just creates more persecution. So you hear about Christians converting to Islam, and Islam makes a big deal about it. You hear that on the news. But when a Muslim converts to Christianity, we keep it very quiet for their sake and hope that they can stay in their community and witness to others. Please, please be praying for the persecuted church. You can also give, through the cooperative program. Your church gives a tithe every week, and part of that goes to the cooperative program. And then the Lottie Moon Christmas office, which is coming up in December. 100% of the money that goes to the Lottie Moon Christmas office goes overseas to support missions. It doesn't stay here to support our offices or to support the programs we have here. It all goes overseas. That money is crucial to what we do. Right now we've got about 4,800 missionaries. We actually only have money to support 4,200. As our folks resign or for one reason leave the field or retire, we're not replacing them right now very, very quickly. So we went from 125 different families serving in Indonesia down to about 90. We'll continue to reduce that, even though we still have hundreds and hundreds of people groups we need to reach. So please give to the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. We really appreciate that. Okay? You can also come serve alongside of us. There are many ways you can do that, many different programs. No matter what your age is, from high school up to retirees, we need people to come and serve alongside of us. We do not have enough missionaries to reach the world. It's not just Americans sending missionaries around the world now. We also have Koreans and Filipinos and Chinese and all kinds of other people groups. Brazilians are sending folks, but we still do not have enough people out there to reach all the different people groups that we need to reach. So we realized that we really need to mobilize the churches back home. We need you guys coming out for mission trips, small groups, big groups, some people coming out to serve permanent like we do. We just need the church to mobilize and help us finish the mission. The Great Commission says, Matthew 28, 19 through 20, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." That word is actually in the Greek ethnos. It means every people group. So it's not like we have some churches in Indonesia, so the work's done. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of people groups that have never even once heard the gospel in their language in Indonesia. And they don't speak Indonesian that well. Some of them don't speak Indonesian at all. We baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe. That's very important in what we do. Teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. God has commanded us to do many things. He didn't command us just to go out and evangelize people and baptize them, but then to disciple them, to teach them to observe. To do that, we need a long-term presence wherever we're at. Behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. He's promised that He's going to give us a harvest. He said the fields are white unto harvest. So He's sending us out, promising that He will be with us, promising that there will be a harvest among every people group. That it's a guarantee. Doesn't mean that'll be in our lifetime. Hopefully it will be in our lifetime. But He's promised there will be people from every tribe, every nation standing before His throne worshiping God. Next slide, please. So God's name is being proclaimed and glorified through the church around the world. So what part do you play? You don't have to spend a lifetime overseas like we're doing. You can be a part of that. There are many different ways. And if you have any questions, please ask us later. This is our contact information across Cameo at mac.com. If you want to contact us for any reason, please feel free to contact us at that email address.
But we want to thank you too. There's nothing in the world I'd rather do than what we do. We love what we do, and that promise of Christ that He would be with us is I can testify to it over and over again. And I'm not saying He's more with me in Indonesia or in Kabul than He is with you guys in Taylor's. We encourage you to do the Great Commission here in this area, in Greer and Taylor's, because that's what He's called us to do. But we do want to thank you because we are getting to live out what God has called us to do because of y'all's giving and because of your prayer. And we just want to thank you very much.
here at Southern Baptist by cooperation. And you have just seen a page put with missions and Stephanie and Anthony and their children too about, because we do what we do, they're able to do what they do. And we're in this thing together, and we're fulfilling the Great Commission, and we're helping people to be on the mission field, but we want to go much further than that. We want to be on a mission ourselves. And so that's why we're always available, we're always open, we're always giving, we're always praying, we're always seeking God about how He will intersect our lives and how we can impact this world around us. Because He gave us the Great Commission, that means we can do the Great Commission. Because it's by His presence and His power working in us. You've heard the story about what God's doing in Indonesia. And you've heard the harvest that has taken place. And it just continues to remind us that we are at that moment in time when we expect the return of Jesus Christ, because He promised there would be a harvest. And there is a harvest taking place. It's happening in Indonesia, it's happening in China, it's happening in all those hard places that used to be very difficult to get into, but now God has thrown open a door. And by the millions, people are coming to Christ every day. God is collecting His church. He's building His church. He's drawing His church. That's the time you and I live in. And so that's the time that we need to have a sense of urgency in everything we do, in our praying, in our giving, and in our going. And listen, guys, I'm excited that these guys are here because we now have an open door to minister in Indonesia. And so take that to heart and take that possibility and begin to pray over it. And I would love to see some of us get on a plane and go minister with these folks in Indonesia. Don't discount that God may lead you to do that. And don't let the circumstances of that, well, it's expensive, I don't have the time. Listen, God wants to see His Great Commission fulfilled, and He will provide the means and the way to do these things. And so it is possible in mine and your life to be involved on the other side of the world in a place like Indonesia. So we will be praying about that and seeking God. And I'll just tell you what, God, if you'd let me go to Indonesia instead of the Congo, I sure would appreciate it. But if not, I'll be headed to the Congo again in May. God sure cares about people. You heard it. It's broken-heartedness over those people who were lost at sea. People who were just searching for something. Searching for freedom, looking for life, looking for a trail to follow. God has blessed us that we can be those people that lead other people and help them find what we're all looking for, which is hope, which is peace, which is life. And so this morning, God offers us life. But not just any life. He offers us His life. That's why He came. That's why He died. So we can experience Him, but also so that He can indwell us. And we can know Christ, and we can know life, and we can have redemption and forgiveness and eternal life. That's what all this is about. God offers that to you this morning. You may be here and you don't know Christ. You don't have a relationship with Him this morning. You may be a visitor. You may be a member. I was a baptized church member when I came to Christ. He is very real, and He's very real in this place. And He desires to have a relationship with each one of us. And maybe you need to do that for the first time this morning. We invite you to know Him this morning. By forgiveness of sins, by surrendering your life to Him, Christ will do it all. He will change your life. You don't have to clean yourself up. There's nothing you can do except just receive His grace, His favor, and receive Him as your Lord and Savior this morning. And maybe this morning that you just need to come back to Him. Maybe it's time to come home this morning. Maybe it's time to surrender your life afresh to Him and just say, God, I know I've been living apart. I've been living my own life. I've been going my own way. I've been following my own path. But this morning, afresh, I've sensed your spirit. I've heard your voice. And this morning, I want to come back. I give myself to you for your service, for your kingdom, and for your honor and glory. You may have other needs in your life this morning. Listen, we're here to encourage you, to help you in any way we can. By the presence of God's Spirit, and by coming alongside of you in this journey of life that we're on. So any way we can be of service, anything that you may need to come and pray about or talk with someone about. As you stand, as Eddie leads us, would you respond to this invitation this morning?